Are you ready for the rule of law to be lost in society? I've always called this WROL, or without rule of law, here in the Nutnfancy project. Hi guys, thanks for watching the video. This is of course Nutnfancy running TMP with another serious video on the concept of WROL. And honestly, it's a bit overwhelming for me. In 2008, I posted a video called WROL, Don't Hasten the Day, talking about my concept of dread for WROL. In other words, how I love rule of law. In other words, society working the way it's working now. And how I advocate our supporting of rule of law. In fact, most of my career has been designed for that purpose, supporting the rule of law. And I'm sure a lot of viewers watching this video are the same way. Military, police, civilians, like firemen, paramedics, all sorts of descriptions support the rule of law. They support the functioning of society. And I'm not just talking about law enforcement. I'm talking about everyone in society who plays an important role, that the economy keeps going, that our way of life as we know it continues. Are you ready for WROL though? I don't know if I am, to be honest with you. In fact, I'll answer that I'm not. I don't know if I ever will be either materially 100% prepared or 100% mentally prepared for the implications of WROL. The purpose of this video is to perhaps hone in on what I feel will be implications of WROL, and more importantly, the resurgence of community. Yes, even when we lose rule of law. I'll tell you what, we live in an amazing age right now. The technology that we enjoy improves every day, and it provides a quality of life that is honestly amazing. If you were to somehow describe to our ancestors in the 1800s our quality of life now, they wouldn't believe you. They'd say, no way. They wouldn't understand the internet, a cell phone, all the cool gadgets that we use, and not just that, but the fact that we can drive down the street and get delicious and high quality food anywhere. They would be flabbergasted. But let's talk a minute to lay a foundation for this video. First, about some rules of the road, which I often do in my videos, especially the philosophy videos. I don't want this video to be one of gloom and doom. I don't want it to be one that instills fear or panic amongst my subscribers or viewers who may find this video on the internet. That's not what I'm about. I'm about hope. I'm about a positive message here in the Nutnfancy project. I always have been. I do lots of gear reviews. Every once in a while I'll do a philosophy video, sometimes very serious in nature, just like this one. But this is a message of hope, and it is designed to perhaps put you in a mindset of community for WROL, because I want to give you some, what I feel, clues as to how it's going to play out, which kind of leads to the next ground rule. I could be completely wrong. Okay? I'm not some prophet. I'm not some all-knowing dude out there that knows how WROL is going to go down. And yes, there's lots of terms for the same thing. I use WROL because it's very descriptive of the way it's going to go, I think. So that's my favorite term. I don't know exactly how it's going to go down. No one does. You know, is it going to go down? I think the answer is an inevitable yes. You know, to what degree will it go down? I don't know. You know, so I don't know. Some of the things I tell you may be completely off base. They're based on my living experience up to this point in my life. Some very distinct experiences I've gone through in life. I'll share them with you as best I can. And on my way of thinking. My value system is a very important part of this video. Okay, on Resurgence of Community, WROL. Okay, you may differ in the opinions, and that's great. But it's basically designed to help you, to put you in a frame of thought, again. Some of the things I say may be controversial. Oh well, welcome to the Nutnfancy project. It's always been that way. I speak my mind, I speak truth, and that is the guiding force here in TMP is truth, and I'm going to do my absolute best at shooting straight with you. Okay, couple ground rules. I probably forgot some more. Feels weird being back in front of the camera. I hate it. But I have to transmit the message, so here it goes. Let's talk about community. Once upon a time, there was a guy who lived all alone. Let's say he's a caveman. And everything was up to him as far as getting food, protecting himself, hunting, his medical care. He did it all himself. Lo and behold, he runs into another fella, and they start talking. It turns out this guy's better at hunting than he is. But this other guy's maybe better at fire making. A community is born. Hey, what do you know? You go out hunting. When you come back, I'll have a fire built. Work sharing. That's what a community is all about. That's why communities were started and evolved and grew to the level that we have now. Work sharing to very definite roles in today's modern society. I should say specialized roles that communities have evolved, and now we're not in charge of everything that makes our life possible. In other words, I am not a doctor. Okay, I'm not a butcher. I'm not a farmer. There's other people that do those jobs, and they do it a lot better than I can. And my job is to go out and earn money and pay them for their services. That's a community. Early on, I'm talking maybe, whatever era you want to go, 1700s all the way up to the 1800s into the early 20th century, communities were very close-knit. Everybody knew each other. You probably knew your butcher. You knew the guy that probably grew your vegetables that you maybe traded things for, because a barter economy was in existence even in those times, especially in rural areas, that is, areas of the country. And so, it was a close-knit society. And you knew the bookkeeper, you knew the sheriff, society. We've lost that. With the onset of technology has also come the onset of isolation. Okay, and that's a key concept of this video. And I want you to understand it and really understand the implications of it. With the internet, for instance, we are able to pretty much completely isolate ourselves. Let's say we go to work, we come back, we get on the internet, and that's our social existence in the internet. And by the way, I'm not saying that's bad, but it's the reality of life for a lot of people. That within their own neighborhoods, they are not connected. Within their own communities, they're not connected. They don't know who their neighbors are. I've been guilty of that, by the way. And I'm not preaching, I'm just saying that's the way it is. I've been guilty of it. It's probably, more than anything, not a purposeful outcome. It's just the outcome of technology. Technology is so cool. We connect to people with our same interests in all types of things, like the Nutnfancy project, and we are very enlightened by participating online. I'm just using the online experience as an example. However, it results in an isolation, a societal isolation, where, again, you don't know who your own neighbors are because you're on the electronic world. Perhaps there's guys, they come home, maybe some internet, lots of video games, and that's their life. They go to work, they play video games, internet. And they don't know much more other than that. The community's still operating, it's still going on. I mean, all the services are functioning perfectly, and it allows this isolation. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? It allows this isolation. And that is a key concept that I'm going to springboard off of right now. When WROL comes without rule of law, all this is going to come to a crashing halt. Okay, it is. Your technology is going to cease to exist for the most part. There are some isolated examples like flashlights or something that is, independent, that'll probably still function as long as you have energy for it. Let's talk about the implications of without rule of law as briefly as I can, because I'm going to set the stage what I'm talking about. First off, there's no food. And by the way, before I launch into this, there's different levels that WROL can happen. Again, I'm not the all-knowing dude out there, but having witnessed history, having read a lot about history, it can come in graduated levels. You can have complete without rule of law. And that's kind of what I'm assuming when I go point by point of the degrees of loss. but it can be very minor, it can be very localized. In other words, it may be in one area of the country that is really hit hard, that seriously, they are in dub raw to the 10th degree, where if you travel 300 miles to the east or something, they don't have hardly any problems at all. Okay, so various levels. I'm going to assume worst case, because when we assume that, or when I go over that, it makes a lot of sense when I talk about sense of community. No food. By the way, how much food do you have on hand right now? And also, are you a producer of food? Are you a farmer? Okay, do you have a garden at your house, in your apartment? Can you produce your own food? Do you have chickens? Do you have cows? Can you produce dairy products? For most of us, the answer is no. And once again, technology is a double-edged sword, right? Because if we were to go back in the 1800s on into the early 20th century, again, a lot of people, in the United States at least, were producing their own food. It was fairly commonplace, again, especially in the more rural parts of the country. They had a couple chickens, they had cows, they had ways to grow food, and they did. I think personally, this is my own opinion, that's one reason the United States of America was able to get through the Great Depression. There are a lot of people that were more or less self-sustaining. They weren't rich by any means. A lot of them had no money at all, but they could put food in their mouths. Okay, so cessation of food delivery. Can't speak. The stocks of all food supplies go barren. Shelves are barren at the grocery store. You ready for that? It's scary, isn't it? That's going to turn good people into desperate people. Maybe cause food riots alone. No food being delivered. Why did that happen, Nutnfancy? Well, pick a reason. Fuel ceases to be delivered. That there's no fuel of any sort or description. Gasoline, for whatever reason, is not being produced. Or if it's being produced, it cannot be transported to where it's needed. Fuel. Economic collapse. I'm talking catastrophic economic collapse. Could cause that. It is frightening, I know. And again, this is not a message of fear or desperation. It's a message of hope. Hang with me. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Okay, so no food. How much do you have on hand? Keep that in mind. No water. How much water do you have on hand? In a true dub raw, my nickname, situation, is water going to be delivered? If it is delivered, is it potable? Is it clean enough to drink? Let's say the answer is no. How long can you live without water? I can go weeks and weeks without food. Not so much water. Again, getting back to why I backpack so much. You really understand the importance of water when you go backpacking. And you're away from your water source. Sometimes how we wash or brush our teeth, we leave the water running. You don't do that when you're hauling in the water. You use every drop very carefully. Even if you're filtering it or if you have a plentiful water supply, it's work to produce it. And so when you go backpacking, you're looking very carefully at your water usage. And it gives you a huge clue bird on what it's going to be like if you lose a water supply. From that alone, I am sad to say you will see a lot of deaths in WROL. I think you will. Water is extremely important. How about waste disposal? And I'm sorry, I don't want to be graphic. Body disposal. How's that going to work? There's no services of any kind. Garbage pickup is done, not happening. Sewage service, not happening. How are you going to take care of that? Do you have sewage facilities without electricity where you live right now? I would guarantee you that most people will answer no if they're honest. I would think most people in my neighborhood or around where I live at least would answer no. They probably don't even think about it because it's by our nature in a modern society, we take things for granted. We think they're always going to be there because as long as we've known it, they've always been there. And that is another concept I'll hit on briefly. It's really going to take a lot of people by surprise when all this goes down. It's just going to result in shock and disbelief. Kind of like I talked about a story of first aid when you come on a huge accident and people are basically just electrified into inaction. Inaction. They will go, I can't believe this is happening. What? The electricity's not turned on. It's been off for a day. What's going on? People are going to be freaking. Okay? No waste disposal. Think about that. How are you going to do that? How are you going to handle that? Maybe later on I'll talk about specifics, my approach to these problems, but that's not the purpose of this video. It's to, again, set the stage. No emergency services. No medical services. Hey, I just hurt myself. I cut myself really, really bad. Phone's not working. Even if it did, the emergency services are one, either unavailable, or two, completely overwhelmed with what's going on. Everybody needs them. When everybody needs them, are you going to get them? Probably not. You are the doctor. You are the first and last responder. You are going to have to handle it. No electricity. Kind of alluded to that already. Turn on the switch, nothing happens. Not for just a day, not just for 3 days, for 3 months. No electricity. Can you say third world? Yeah. Think about everything that entails too. No electricity. No internet. No way to recharge batteries. Okay, everyone says, well, I'm set up. I have a lot of batteries. Okay, how are you going to recharge them? Unless you have a very expansive solar system and a lot of sun to recharge them and a lot of time, because all the solar systems take time, you're probably going to run out of batteries too eventually in a long-term WROL situation. In a lot of ways, we're getting plunged right back into the early 1800s. We are. We're back into the early 1800s. There's no electricity. You're going to have to fend for yourself. We'll get to that in a sec. That level of life is going to come back to us. I think in our lifetimes we'll see that to one degree or another. I totally hope I'm wrong, by the way. It's already talked about no fuel. And I'll add no batteries as well. I mean, what happens every time a hurricane or earthquake happens? People run to the stores, right? And they buy batteries. The shelves go barren of bottled water, flashlights, batteries, and these sorts of emergency supplies. There's no batteries to be had. How's your storage of batteries right now? Could you go a year without having to purchase a battery? And keep in mind, your level of usage for that battery is not down here where it is now. It's going to go way up because there's no electricity, right? You're going to need it for illumination. I'm talking flashlights here all the time. So your battery consumption is going to go very high. And there's other ways to illuminate, which I highly advocate. I'm talking about kerosene lamps too. But how's your storage of kerosene, right? Okay, can you take a year down the road with your kerosene supply? Hard questions, I know. How about no building materials? In WROL, you've got no way to fix things. There's no plywood, there's no 2x4s, there's no nails, there's no screws. All that stuff has been cleaned out and it's gone and it's not being replenished. What if you need to repair your building? What if it's been damaged by an earthquake? You have a huge hole in your roof. Do you have a sheet of polyethylene plastic to stretch across it? What if other buildings have come crashing down? Do you have a way to repair them to at least a livable level? I know. It's a lot to think about. And again, I pose a question, are you ready for WROL? The reason I go into the details and the implications, some of the implications, there's probably a lot I haven't covered, and I'll get into a major one here in a second. It's because I want you to think about how difficult it is to really, really, really prepare for all this stuff. Number one, it's expensive, right? To have all these supplies on hand, have room to store all this stuff, it's expensive. Food supply, that takes up room, it's expensive, it has to be rotated. Kerosene supply, where are you going to store it, how are you going to store it, is it legal to store it where you have it, all those things. I'm going to answer that most of us, honestly, are not and probably never will be completely prepared for WROL. We're just not. However, and this is one of the, conceptions I want to attack in this video, there's people out there that think that when WROL kicks off that they're going to be an island unto themselves, Here come the riots, I'm going to get on the water tower with my 30-06 and go to town. Anybody who comes for my stuff, I'm going to just gun them down. There's guys that believe that. There's actually, I hate to say, people who hope for that. I think it's fantasy. In fact, I think it's fantasy if you think in WROL you're going to survive alone. I'm dead serious. Talk to people who've been through big natural disasters, perhaps like Katrina, and they will tell you that it really didn't go down that way. And some of them, people I've read about, were very prepared. What's going to happen is a resurgence of community. I'll take you back to a personal experience of mine. This is one of the ones I was hinting to earlier. But our family went through an experience of having no electricity for almost 2 weeks solid in the northwestern part of the U.S. In a modern society, that is a long time. It was due to an ice storm. Rain started, got worse, turned into freezing rain, and up there they have all their power lines rigged between poles. They're not underground. And a lot of trees, huge pine trees. These trees became weighted with ice. I'm talking over a vast distance. Multiple states came crashing down, completely took out the electrical system. Remember I said it could happen in a number of different ways? It could be a complete natural disaster that launches us into WROL. All kinds of natural disasters. Earthquakes, ice storms, hurricanes, volcanoes could launch us into WROL and totally wipe out what we think is a foolproof societal system. When that happened, 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks without electricity, it was an eye-opener for everybody on our block. Getting back to sense of community, the Nutnfancy clan has always been very prepared. I would say probably not the most prepared, but you probably get a sense of that here in TNP. We had stuff, and when this kicked off in the late 90s, I was ready to rock and roll. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Guess who wasn't? My neighbors. I found out very quickly my neighbors had very few supplies on hand, and they were freaking. At least my across the street neighbor was. They were like, they were going crazy. Down the street a ways, one of my neighbors just freaked out to the level that she and her family searched out a hotel that had a backup generator, and they moved into that hotel for a long time. I'm talking until electricity came back, and the hotel filled up. They're like, we can't take any more. We're on backup power. I like to think that we are tough enough as a people, hearkening back to perhaps my depussification video, that we can handle this. Okay, we can handle the tough times. We can handle the loss of electricity, the loss of garbage services, and we can manage. It's not going to be convenient. It's not going to be fun. It's going to suck. WROL sucks. Let me make a distinction, though. What our family went through back then was not actually WROL. It was actually just loss of electricity. Big difference. However, the lessons remain, and the lesson that really I came away with is be prepared to work your butt off. Remember going down the street and grabbing a burger? That's done. You're not going to be doing that. The heat that you took for granted, gone. Your house is going to be frigid. If you live in a desert climate and you rely on air conditioning to keep you cool, that's gone. Can you imagine how many people, and again, I'm just being dead honest with you guys, can die if that happens? If air conditioning ceases in some of these big desert areas, Phoenix, Las Vegas, where it gets up to 115 in the day, no AC. There's people with medical conditions, some elderly folks that will not make it. It's serious. When we went through that, it was wintertime. It got cold. No big deal. I have lots of warm gear. But I'll tell you what, I was working my butt off. Cutting wood, splitting wood, stoking our fireplaces, putting food on the table for my family. And luckily, I was able to get some time off from work to be able to do these things. And what I found is that, here's a key concept, our neighborhood came together. Okay? The neighbor I had rarely seen 3 houses down suddenly became very known to me, and I to them. My across the street neighbor, probably the 6 houses surrounding us, became a group. And I actually started doing some group cooking. I had a cast iron stove, runs off propane, and I was cooking some meals up. They would chip in for a couple supplies they had, but that's what I'm talking about. Even in WROL, granted that wasn't WROL, that would be much worse, you are going to see a sense of community resurge. Okay? And I think that's best how you're going to get through these tough times, is helping your neighbors out, and vice versa, them helping you out. Remember all the implications of WRL I talked about? No electricity, how much food you have on hand, how many batteries do you have. I really think it's an impossibility to get that way up here and really maintain that level of preparation. However, when you pull resources within the neighborhood, I think you'll find that you'll have these gaps covered. In other words, maybe you run out of batteries and your neighbor down the street has a lot of batteries. And maybe you can do, another concept, bartering. Yep, that within your own neighborhood you can say, hey, I'll trade you this for that. The economy is going to resurge and it's going to be resilient. It was that way back when, and it'll be that way when all heck breaks loose. The economy will resurge on one level or another. I think first it'll become a barter economy. It has to. I mean, that's just common sense. In the short term that I lived it, I'm talking without electricity, we didn't go to that because it wasn't long enough. But if you go month after month with all cessation of services, nothing being delivered, I guarantee you, you're going to be bartering for things. Good stuff on hand, 223 ammo, 9mm ammo, salt, gold, silver, hugely barterable. If you don't have this food stuff, hey, I'll give you, 25 rounds of 9mm for it. Hey, you're on. That's what's going to happen. It's probably going to happen on a community level, though. You will find that you're going to get to know your neighbors when all this stuff comes down. So if you're isolated now with technology, it's kind of like musical chairs. You're having fun, dancing around, the music's going to stop. Here you go. There's your chair. Well, whatever your state of preparedness is, you're going to live with that, and you are going to get to know your neighbors well. Something I'm going to advocate in this video, going along those lines, is you get to know your neighbors now. Okay? My neighbors, both near and far, are known to me. I know them by name. I know their families. I know what they're about. They know what I'm about. Generally speaking. Several of them are good friends of mine. Right now, even in rule of law, they watch after me. I watch after them. Something goes down on their property, I'm there. Police first, but if it's time critical, hey, I'm there. Vice versa. If something goes down on my property, they're there. They're here. They're there for me. In rule of law. Okay, to me, that's being a good neighbor. Okay, forget WROL. It's just being a good neighbor. It's some kind of good. It's taking care of your fellow man. Something I advocate. Kind of going back to my value system. That will really pay off in WROL. That you have that foundation with your neighbor. Have you discussed it with your neighbor already? I have. The ones that I feel comfortable, by the way, discussing this, I have. I said, hey, if this goes down, make sure you have some of this on hand, some of that on hand. I'll have more of this. They've said they would. Talk is cheap. I hope they are. I don't go in their house. Hey, how's your inventory looking? I'm taking them up for their word, but that's kind of how it goes. Granted, you can freak some people out with this discussion, right? You can go to your neighbor and say, hey, man, how much ammo do you have on hand? I'm running short of 9mm. Can you buy a couple cases? Just keep it in storage? What are you, some kind of freak? I know, there's different levels, and you have to be tactful how you approach it. You don't want to seem like an extremist or a weirdo. A lot of people perceive you that way if you're a prepper or whatever. But approach it. When you get to know them, and again, you have to get to know them, approach it. Say, hey, ask the same questions I've asked on this video. Hey, if food stops being delivered, how do you look? Well, why do you ask? Because you're my neighbor, and if you go starving, I know you're going to come knocking at my door for help. See? So we kind of want to have a situation where the rising tide, or an incoming tide raises all ships. Okay, you all are going to be in the same boat in your neighborhood. Like it or not, you will. WROL goes down, you guys are in it together. You're going to get to know each other, and you're probably going to start building that micro community once again. Sharing work. You're going to find out specialties. What's your skill set? What's your skill set? Oh, cool, he can do this. He can build this. He has materials to build this. All right, you're going to be our builder. And in comes another important concept for WROL. One I think a lot of people fixate on, and I don't want you to fixate on it. I want you to be aware of it. I want you to prepare for it, and that is security. Within your neighborhood, you're probably going to find some threats to your security, depending on where you live. You could live in a very, countrified atmosphere where it's not going to be a problem at all. You could be in a very urban environment where it's going to be an immediate concern. Remember that desperation, fear, and panic I talked about in Dub Raw? Well, it's going to happen. And I think you're going to see people who are not prepared, who are panicked, and who now know that there's no, consequence of their actions. And they're going to be empowered for that. Maybe they feel it's time to get even with whoever. And they're going to band together in groups, maybe small groups, maybe large groups, and they're going to go on a hunting trip. And they may come to your neighborhood and they go, you know what? I like your neighborhood. And we're going to take this, we're going to do this, we're going to rape that. Deal with it. The worst of humanity, I feel, and the best of humanity comes out in these situations. Historically proven. This is nothing new. You'll see it again in your lifetime. The best and the worst of humanity. That's where your value system really comes into play, by the way. What's right? What's wrong? Mine's very defined. It works for me. I don't push it on you, but I recommend you get a value system that you believe in that value system. It's going to come into play when we talk about security for your neighborhood. Okay, again, you're going to work together as a group. Since you're watching this video, guess who's probably going to be in charge of security for your neighborhood? You are. Probably. There's no one that's thought about it to the level you have. There's probably no one who's prepared to the level you are, at least for security. It's going to be you. You're going to be organizing it. Like it or not. If you have military training, awesome. If you have LE training, awesome. Great. All that will play to your benefit. If you have tactical shooting courses, awesome. Can you shoot under stress? Something you see us do all the time in TMP. Why do I do that? Kind of for that reason. It's normal, second nature, shooting under stress. Okay? Let's talk about the implication of force because it is very, very serious and I'm not the end-all expert and don't take it as such. The way I think now, though, you're going to have to come up with some very defined rules of use of force within your neighborhood in WROL. What constitutes use of force? Meet together as a group. Honestly, I'd really like to have the head of security in your neighborhood when WROL kicks off, and I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the chief villager, be two different people. Kind of like, the military. The military's not in charge of the government. Separate, civilians are. I kind of like that organization in your micro community. Someone who's very wise, that has a good value system, they have a lot of life experience, and they can exercise really good judgment. And then the chief of security, whoever that individual is, recruits other responsible, clear-thinking individuals to help implement neighborhood security. I know, this topic is huge. I can make video after video on this. It's overwhelming for me, honestly, because I know questions will arise. Well, Nutnfancy, how do you envision neighborhood security going? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to secure a perimeter of whatever community we end up in setting up, at least temporarily. It may not be permanent. It just depends on the larger community. Does the city come back? Does it start functioning again? If it does, great. Are police services available again? Awesome. In that case, neighborhood security comes down, and now we kind of slowly, transition into rule of law again. But until that time, which may take months, maybe even longer, it's up to you, man. These roving gangs, again, I don't want to be all paranoid, but I think it's a reality. How are you going to handle them? Or a lot of neighborhoods aren't going to handle them at all. I'll tell you that right now. That these individuals, whoever they may be, will come in and they're going to have their way. Deaths will result. They're going to wreak mayhem. Not in my neighborhood. I guarantee you that. They come to the Nutnfancy neighborhood, they're going to be met with an armed response if appropriate. What's the nature of your business here? Why are you here? It's basically martial law on a community level. And you're in charge. And again, I'm assuming police services are nowhere to be found. They're gone. They're overwhelmed, unavailable. We've seen that in society throughout the years. Huddled in their headquarters, or maybe they're taking care of their own families. It's up to you. I'm going to have checkpoints. Checkpoint here, checkpoint here. They're revolving. They're unpredictable. I'm going to have checkpoints that back up other checkpoints. How are you going to communicate between those checkpoints? What's your rotation and what's the schedule? All these things a security advisor or manager comes up with a plan. Again, guys say, hey man, should I have walkie-talkies? Yeah, how are you going to, they're a high energy device. How are you going to put batteries in it? Well, I'm going to charge them. Okay, have a way to charge them. I'm not saying it's not doable. It's difficult though, very difficult. We're back to the 1800s. So technology of the 1800s is going to resurge the way they did business back then, with a few exceptions. It's going to be the way we did business, or will do business in WROL. It was that way during the power outage. I mean, the whole time I'm chopping wood, I'm like, I feel like my ancestors here. I mean, I'm trying to put food on the table. I don't have any free time. It was all taking care of my family. My kids were young and taking care of my neighbors. Welcome to WROL. Okay, so checkpoints. Yeah, I would do that. I would have a perimeter. I'm not going to, in this video, say, hey, this is what constitutes a breach of security and this is what you should do in that situation. I think it's highly individualistic and it's highly dependent on your value system. I would recommend you use very good judgment on the use of force and use it very reluctantly. Okay, even in WROL. You hear me? That is extremely important, an extremely important concept to me. Err on the side of not using it if you can possibly do so. Okay, use non-lethal devices if you can. Use talking if you can. And this kind of gets to a concept which I've shown on camera in the Nutnfancy project forever, and that is a show of force.
Pretty good.
Tactical vest, weapons, shown at the checkpoint. That is a good thing in WROL. Think about it. You're one of these roving gangs. You look, you see 4 checkpoints armed to the teeth, not just with a single shot shotgun or something like that. Tactical carbines, multiple magazines. They're dressed alike. They're very serious. Would you mess with that neighborhood? No, you're going to roll on down the road and go, unfortunately, wreak havoc on the next one. A show of force is critical in WROL. You want to look badass. Okay, you want to look like you mean business, and you have to be able to back it up. Okay, if it comes to that, you need to back it up. And by the way, that should be one of your questions to your security team members. Are you ready for this? Are you ready to defend your family's life on the neighborhood? It may get ugly. Are you ready for it? And then you can talk about tactics. I'm not going to address it in my video. And I'm not the expert on it either. Okay, security is a big, big thing. And a lot of guys in WROL, by the way, this is kind of a side note, they go, well, when WROL kicks off, I'm hitting the mountains, man. I'm bugging out. Are you? Where are you going? If you're lucky enough to have a cabin, and more importantly, if you're lucky enough to be able to reach that cabin, wherever it is, I say more power to you. Rock on. Stock cabin, whatever your situation is. Actually, I think that's a great idea. Depending on the locality or the nature of WROL. I mean, what if it's huge where your cabin is or your other house is? I recommend staying put. Don't go anywhere. Your home is your fortress, man. Defend your home. Have all your preparations there. How much can you really carry, too? Again, getting to the reason why I backpack, always have, is you get a real understanding about SAWC, man. You are very limited in what you can carry. Well, I'm going to carry this, I'm going to carry that. Well, yeah, when's the last time you did that? Especially for distance, especially under stress. Especially when other people are after you, or maybe want what you have. It's a big decision. I don't know. I'm not going to say there aren't situations where you would want to bug out, leave. Natural disaster, you may have to get the heck out of Dodge. You may have to have a kit ready to rock and roll. I advocate that. When possible, stay put. Inevitably, the question will arise. Nutnfancy, what if law enforcement or fragments thereof come knocking at my door and say, hey, get out of here, we're evacuating you? First, let me talk to my law enforcement brethren and sisters. Think wisely about how you're going to implement such an order like Katrina. In Katrina, they did that, and I was dead set against it. It pissed me off when I heard that. That, to me, is an unconstitutional order to say, hey, you need to leave the premises. Oh, and by the way, give me your guns. I say, forget that. I'm not going to tell you how to respond to that. That's a value system question. But it's wrong. And I think an individual should have the right to stay on their premises, even if it, this is a hard thing to say. I was going to say, even if it endangers their life. Technically speaking, by government authorities. Well, you need to evacuate. Well, I don't want to evacuate. No, we got in a deuce and a half. You get in now. I'm against it. It pisses me off. I don't like hearing that. I don't think governments should be able to do that. It's not up to them. If you're in the military, and you go and you get a order to go knocking doors and confiscating weapons, I say don't obey it. Flat out, do not obey it. It's an unconstitutional order. There's an answer for you. So what to do specifically, that's all I'll say. It's a value system question. Maybe later date I'll approach it, but it's prickly. I don't like it. Stay put if you can. Pool your resources. Establish that micro community. Okay? A bartering community within your own neighborhood. Again, you're not going to have everything on hand. I guarantee it. You're just not. It's impossible. It's expensive. I do advocate, however, that you make reasonable preparations as you can afford. Every month, you and your family should sit down, or you, if you're alone, should sit down and say, this month I'm doing this. I'm going to buy a 20-pack of AA batteries. I'm going to date it. I'm going to put it in my storage. Next month, I'm going to buy 20 cans of, beans of one sort or another. I'm going to date it. I'm going to put it in storage. The next month, you do that, and every month you're making preparations. 1 month, I'm going to buy salt, a huge bag of salt. It's probably going to be rare in WROL. Barterable. Put that in storage. I'm going to buy medical supplies, bandages, hydrogen peroxide, a water filter, all the stuff you need to live. You want to know what that stuff is? Go watch a Nutnfancy backpacking video. You're going to have to meet all those needs. Shelter, food, tools, like firecraft, and sadly in WROL, defensive capabilities. I really mean sadly, because it sucks that it have to come to that. But the flip side to that is worse. That if you ignore that security is not an issue, I don't need security, no, it won't happen. And then it does happen and you're not prepared mentally or materially, and you watch what goes down from people who are desperate and honestly some flat out evil, you're going to wish you had a gun. If you don't believe me, go study history. Okay? This is a message of hope. It's not a message of panic. It's not a message of doomsday. I'm not about that in the Nutnfancy project. Honestly, this is an intimidating video for me to make. And you can see how long I've waited. It's 2011, Midsummer. I've waited 3 years to make another WROL video. Because I posted WROL, Don't Hasten the Day. I saw the impact of that video and the response, and it honestly overwhelmed me. I was like, wow, I never would have thought. And it also taught me I've got to choose my words very carefully. Because there's people, perhaps what I say, that will go off and do that. So I hope you get the realness and the heart of this message, that it is of hope. Get to know your neighbors. If you're at odds with your neighbors, see if you can repair it. Okay, if it takes an apology, apologize. See if you can repair that. Mend a fence. I guarantee you'll be so much better off. Forget about WRL in life if you're on good terms with your neighbor. If you've done something to offend them, apologize. See if you can rectify it. Make it good. And then if any of this kicks off, you'll be so glad you did. That you have an ally and not an enemy, next door or a couple streets down. You all are going to be in it together, whether you like it or not. I really addressed the whole concept of, preparedness sharing. Well, these guys aren't prepared. None of them are. I'm the only one prepared. Do I share all my resources? That is another prickly subject, and I don't have any clear-cut answers for you. I would advocate helping your fellow man to the maximum extent you possibly can. Okay, pull your resources. Be friends with your neighbors. Be allies with your neighbors. Talk honestly about WROL at your next neighborhood barbecue. Hey, if this goes down, what do you think about this? Common sense ways of maybe you can be more prepared. Again, I really hope it never happens. And I love rule of law, and I support it wholeheartedly. This is a Nutnfancy philosophy video on WROL. Thanks for watching. See ya. Sometimes you can adjust the speed of the retrieve, but you don't want to. We've been going back and forth like this for like a minute, just messing around. Out in the woods. love it. They'll love it too. Oh yeah. They see that guy. 2 for 1 special. And pull your trigger slow. Don't jerk it. Nice. Pretty, that sun coming through the trees.
Get that snow. Good girl. Come on. What is that snow? Get it. Go on, go on. Good girl. Good girl.